While there are a lot of things I've covered in Tactics Ogre Reborn, the game is huge, and as I'm delving deeper into its systems and content, there's a lot of little things that I'm learning. And if I'm just learning them, it's likely that a lot of y'all need to know as well. So, let's talk about things I've missed. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. It's 2023, and while my intention to make content during the holiday break didn't pan out, we're back now. Thank you all for the support in making 2022 a great year, by the way. And since we're moving into the new year, we have a new goal. 15,000 subscribers. Y'all proved me wrong when I didn't think we'd hit 5K in 2022. Let's see what happens in 2023, shall we? For today's topic, I have some miscellaneous facts and tips first, then a slew of information about elemental affinities and interactions. Let's begin. The first thing I've learned about the finer points of Tactics Ogre Reborn is that it's really not just strength and intelligence that are going to impact your damage. Dexterity and mind are just as important, and as you increase these stats, you'll see an increase in your physical and magical damage respectively. This might seem like a no-brainer to some of you, but it bears stating when stat charms are hard to come by in bulk until the very late game, foods are expensive and rare, and, as we now know, multiple stats impact your damage. For example, I've been putting Dex into my Berserker recently, and it has helped her damage output tremendously. I've also been pumping Mind on Cressida, which has the double benefit of increasing her damage and her ability to inflict status and debuffs with the relevant magic. And this will, of course, be true for any caster that you're using, especially one that's using debuffing dark magic. It is worth noting as well that from what I've seen, Dex and Mind don't have as much of an impact on your damage as the primary strength and intelligence stats, but if you're looking to buff up a unit and you're sitting on some Dex and Mind charms or some food, consider adding them to the pot. Next up, did you know that undead units don't count as incapacitated? When pursuing an optional objective that requires you to beat a level without any incapacitated units, consider bringing a team of the undead. When they're knocked down, they're just that, knocked down. As they do not actually die and get back up on their own, they're not considered incapacitated. They're only considered incapped if they're exercised after being knocked down. And fortunately, the times you'll have to worry about that happening to you are few and far between. This will be of particular use in the Palace of the Dead, where to get extra stat charms and the like, you'll often need to win without using the chariot and without any incapped units. For those of you who are pursuing the No Incapacitations title, this may also be of use. Note, I've not yet tested this for myself, but it stands to reason that Undead will not add to your incapacitated units list. If you're going for this title, and you're in a position to field an army of the damned, it might make your life a little bit easier if you do so. Experiment with it, and if it works, let us know in the comments. Next up, we have grenades, which scale with your weapon proficiency, meaning that they will always deal very viable damage. If you didn't know, grenades are a consumable that you can buy in shops in Chapter 2. They can be purchased for 750 goth apiece and to deal AoE elemental damage in a plus formation, with the element being based on which grenade you've purchased. What's noteworthy is that the damage of your grenades scales with your weapon proficiency, no matter what it is. Dagger, sword, cudgel, bow, whatever, it all works. You'll reach maximum damage by having a rank 30 weapon skill, with a plus 20 boost from the relevant weapon's crafted earring. You can then further buff this damage with physical cards. Full credit to community member Baka Nikajaga for doing the math here and filling me in. Now, normally these grenades can only be used in melee range, meaning you'll hit your own unit when you use it, dropping it at your feet, generally not the recommended usage of a grenade. But they can also be thrown with the lobber skill. So, units such as Beast Tamers now have access to a cheap, mana-free, ranged AoE attack that will not just always be relevant, but often deal massive damage. Of course, you can only bring 4 grenades per battle per unit, but even so, in most fights you shouldn't really need more than that. I highly recommend looking into speccing out a grenadier unit and watching the fireworks. Circling back around to the zombies we mentioned before, we have number 4. You can level zombies using charms. And I know this is a rather minor point, but it is one that I've seen people surprised by, so I think it bears stating. While it's true that zombified units can't gain post-battle experience, they can be leveled using XP charms. This is actually wonderful to know, as this makes zombies fairly risk-free meat shields that will still maintain viability. One common tactic I've seen is to get a zombie dragon or two. Due to the natural bulk and abilities of dragons, they're already quite hard to kill. Then, knowing they'll get right back up when they do go down, you never need to worry about them beyond the occasional exorcism, and you have a fire and forget frontliner. Just don't try to use more than one or maybe two at a time, lest you not have enough charms to level them. Continuing on the zombie train, we have number 5. Liches and Divine Knights cannot become zombies. If you're looking to make an all-undead army that isn't constrained to the classes that skeletons and ghosts can be, you unfortunately won't be able to add these powerful late-game classes to that party. For Divine Knights, that's not too big of a deal, but of course, the Lich would be great to have for extra necromancy and other undead synergies, dark magic, all that type of stuff. It's a shame, but so it goes. Looks like you're going to be stuck with necromancers as your late-game zombified dark magic caster. Number 6, characters will heal for more if they are casting spells while of the light element. This is another minor point, but it's an improvement that could just make the difference between success and failure in a tough fight. Just like matching a character's elemental affinity with their spells will increase damage, using a divine affinity character to heal will increase their healing output. Again, this isn't a huge difference, maybe an increase of 40 HP in a healing spell, but still, it could be the difference maker. So, if you're using some clerics, or something like a divine rune fencer for healing, consider using a light charm and changing them to divine affinity for some sweet bonuses. Number 7, did you know that there's a menu to access your party and equipment in the store to save yourself some extra menuing? When doing a lot of buying, selling, crafting, and upgrading in the shop, save yourself some time and use the party menu you can see in the shop. I somehow missed this until I was literally days into my playthrough. Like, as in actual hours. Days worth of hours into my playthrough, and I didn't know this until chat pointed it out. But you can access your entire party, including equipping and unequipping all your gear, checking stats, the whole kit and caboodle. I still have a lot of muscle memory that I need to unlearn that backs me out of the shop before I even realize what I'm doing, but when crafting and relic upgrading, this is a useful little feature to swap gear around as needed. It's also quite nice for checking what spells you need to get. There's so many spells. There's so many. Even now, with the condensed spell list, there's so many, and it's hard to remember for me what character needs what. Use this menu, trust me. And like, seriously, as much as I love hearing, "There's a familiar face," sometimes I just want to be efficient and get done with the shop, you know? Number 8, certain beasts will give you the orbs you need for Deneb's side quest. It's not just dragons. So, I mean, basically, this one is exactly as it says on the tin. Shout out to a few fine folks for pointing this one out to me. When doing Deneb's quest, you can get the orbs that you need from units other than just dragons. Credit to Kwang-Bei in the comments of my Deneb video for pointing the following out. You can get Gloom Orbs from Cockatrice as a substitute for Dark Dragons, since they are rather rare. You can get Flood/Water Orbs from Octopi as a substitute for Flood Dragons. You know, Octopi tend to show up a bit earlier than Flood Dragons do. And you can get Dust Orbs from Griffins, which is a substitute for the Cloud Dragon, which, again, you're going to see plenty of Griffins before you start seeing Dragons, so it could be an easy early pickup. The other notable substitution is that Balder Golems can be substituted for Arc Dragons when trying to get Radiant Orbs. But the issue with that is, in my experience, Balder Golems will generally only show up very late anyway, like in the Palace of the Dead late, so it's probably actually easier to scoop up an Arc Dragon from a story battle than trying to get a Balder Golem. The other elemental dragons, by the way, are quite easy to find in the Farampa Wildwood, so I wouldn't worry about going out of your way to get beasts to replace those orbs. Like, just go to the Farampa Wildwood, use the strategies outlined in my Deneb guide, you'll get the dragons you need there, I promise. Moving on from general tips and info, we have 5 more points about elemental affinity and other elemental interactions. There's a lot to unpack with these points, and some I'm still kicking myself for not knowing sooner. So, number 9. Elemental affinities on weapons will increase or decrease your attack depending on your character's elemental affinity. This one legit blew me away, and it was only pointed out because I couldn't figure out why a statistically superior katana was actually reducing Hobram's attack when I equipped it to him. The answer was that it had an attached element that conflicted with his personal elemental affinity. And if I'm remembering correctly, I believe it was a water element katana conflicting with his fire affinity. Due to this conflict, he was actually taking a hit to his attack that made the better katana worse for him specifically. My chat then informed me that all I had to do to use this katana successfully was to switch Hobrum's element. I could either change it to a neutral element with water, or ideally, change him to water himself to increase his damage. I had plenty of water charms on hand, so that's what I did. The increase in physical attack I saw was notable, so I then quickly went through and aligned all of the characters in my army with the elements of their weapons wherever I could. It wasn't possible everywhere. Not all weapons have elemental affinities. Some are rarer, like dark or divine, and some units can't be switched to it, or I don't have charms, whatever, but still. It was a nice little power boost. I recommend you do the same. It is free damage. Number 10, you can change any class to the dark element by switching a character to Terror Knight, using a dark charm, then switching back. As I mentioned previously, you may find yourself in a bit of a pickle if the weapon you're using is of the dark element, or potentially the divine element, but the class you're using can't be switched to that element. Take, for example, my berserker here, Ella Theron. I have her equipped with late-game crafted fists, the Kerberos Claws. These are dark element fists that can deal big damage, so of course I want her element to be dark to match. But berserkers can't be switched to dark. The answer: switch to a class that can be given the dark element, such as Terror Knight. Use your dark charm, then switch back to berserker, or whatever other class you're trying to make dark. The element will stick, and you'll have yourself your broody new damage dealer. Moving on, you can tell if a finishing move has an attached element based on the color of its icon. Speaking of paying attention to attached elements, you may have noticed some finishing moves have differently colored icons. If you didn't pick up on it, this denotes what element, if any, the damage of the finisher in question will be. Most commonly, from my experience, you'll see fire, ice, and lightning element finishers, though there are others as well, depending on the weapon you're wielding. This is a nice little quality of life feature, letting you tell at a glance what element your attack will be, if that's relevant info for your upcoming attack. And why would that info be relevant? Well, did you know that you can match your character's element with the element of their finisher to increase the damage of said finisher? Like with other elemental interactions, such as weapon and character elements aiding or hampering your damage, the same is true for your elemental finishers. Much like with matched healing and damage spells, this isn't a crucial factor, but where you can make it work for you, it'll certainly help. Most often, you'll likely see this referenced when discussing Rune Fencers and Valkyries, as players will be quick to suggest you make these units lightning-aligned spear wielders. This will allow them to make the most use of the level 3 finishing move for spears, Giga Tempest, a ranged, plus-shaped AoE finisher that deals lightning damage. Paired with the ability to inflict lightning averse via their magic, and you'll deal a lot of damage with this finisher. And this is a note for all types of finishers. If you are able to align a character's weapon and personal element and the element of your preferred finisher for them all together, you're going to see a marked damage increase. So pay attention to this stuff, especially as you get into the late game. And finally, if the element of your finisher is at an advantage against the opponent's element, you'll do more damage. If it's at a disadvantage, you'll deal less damage. It stands to reason, I suppose, that the element of your finisher will increase or decrease the damage that you deal, depending on how it interacts with your target's elemental affinity. It does follow the same type of formula as magic. If you've ever wondered why you seem to randomly deal more or less damage between your different finishers, that's probably why. This makes weapons like hammers extra useful, as they have not one, not two, but 3 different elemental finishers and 1 non-elemental finisher as well. And for weapons that only have 1 or 2 elements in their finishers, well, those non-elemental ones will be important too, as they'll always deal reasonable damage, even if you find yourself kind of at a poor matchup elementally against your current opponents. In short, I hope that all these points about elemental affinity and interactions drive home the idea that you must pay attention to elemental interactions in Tactics Ogre Reborn. It may be playing a much bigger part in your successes and your failures on the battlefield than you realize. And with all that said, Happy New Year, everyone! It's good to get back to making guide content for Tactics Ogre. I can't wait to go live and vibe with y'all again soon. Thank you for your support last year. I hope that I'm able to keep putting out fun and informative content for y'all going into 2023. There's certainly a ton of content for me to cover yet in Tactics Ogre Reborn, and a bunch of new stuff coming out that I want to cover as well. So, again, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Have a good night, stay safe and healthy out there, and remember, be good to each other. Bye now.